You ever wonder why sometimes the kinder you are, the worse people seem to treat you? Let's talk about that. See, kindness is one of the most powerful traits a person can have. It builds bridges, diffuses conflict, and earns trust. But here's the hard truth. Most people won't tell you when kindness isn't grounded in self, respect, and clear boundaries, it doesn't always inspire admiration. Sometimes it invites disrespect. Now, why does that happen? The answer lies in how human psychology works. People are wired to assess others constantly. We're scanning for cues, signals, patterns, and in the absence of direct communication, people rely on what you do to determine what they can do to you. So when someone sees that you're always available, always agreeable, always forgiving, without question or pushback, they don't always interpret that as compassion. They start interpreting it as a lack of strength. And that's where things shift, because strength, emotional strength, psychological strength is what most people unconsciously respect. When you're kind without boundaries, what you're unintentionally doing is signaling that you will accept being second, that you will tolerate mistreatment to avoid conflict, that you'll swallow disrespect just to keep the peace. And once that perception sets in, even good people may begin to overlook your needs, ignore your voice, or test your limits. Let me be clear. This doesn't make your kindness the problem. The problem is that the kindness isn't anchored. It's floating. It's not tied to a firm inner core that says, I care about you, but I also care about me. That's where boundaries come in. Boundaries are not walls. They're not ultimatums. They are the invisible fences of self-respect. They're how you teach others where your line is, where respect starts, and where manipulation ends. Without them, your kindness becomes a tool others can use against you. With them, your kindness becomes a gift people feel honored to receive. Let's make it practical. Think about the person who's constantly saying yes to every request, every demand, every ask, whether at work, in a relationship, or with family. Over time, what happens? People start expecting that yes, they stop appreciating it. And more dangerously, they begin to assume you don't have anything more important going on, that their time matters more than yours. You've accidentally trained them to believe your kindness is bottomless and that you won't hold them accountable if they take too much. It doesn't start with evil intention. It's just human nature. When there's no friction, people keep pushing. When there's no resistance, they don't pause to ask if they've gone too far. Philosophers like Aristotle spoke of the golden mean, the idea that virtue exists between extremes. Too much indulgence, you become passive. Too much aggression, you become harsh. But in the middle, where courage meets compassion, that's where virtue lives. Kindness works the same way. If it's not balanced by inner strength, it becomes appeasement. Appeasement doesn't win respect. It wins dependency, and sometimes even contempt. So how do you fix that? How do you remain kind without being disrespected? You start by redefining what kindness means to you. Real kindness isn't about never saying no. It's not about always being available. It's about caring deeply, but not at the cost of yourself. It's being able to show grace and grit. It's knowing when to offer help and when to step back so someone can learn to help themselves. It's listening with empathy, but speaking with conviction when your values are challenged. You stop apologizing for having standards. You stop watering yourself down just to be more likable. And you start letting people experience the full you, not the edited version you present just to avoid tension. You want to know the moment everything shifts. It's when you realize that your value is not determined by how much you're willing to endure silently. It's defined by how much you respect yourself and whether your actions align with that self-respect. That's when the energy around you changes. That's when people who once pushed your limits start noticing they can't do that anymore. Not because you've become unkind, but because you've become clear, and clarity is magnetic. Clarity commands attention. Clarity teaches others, this is who I am. This is what I tolerate, and this is what I don't, without ever needing to raise your voice. Some of the kindest, strongest people in history, leaders, healers, thinkers, they weren't kind because they feared conflict. They were kind in spite of conflict. They knew how to extend generosity without giving up their backbone. They knew that real influence doesn't come from pleasing people. It comes from knowing who you are and being unshakable in that identity. So the next time someone tells you you're too nice, don't just take that as a compliment. Ask yourself, am I being nice at my own expense? Is my kindness coming from strength or from fear? Because if it's coming from fear, from the desire to be liked, from the hope that people won't reject you, then that's not kindness. That's self-abandonment in disguise. And eventually people start to notice, not consciously, not maliciously, but they do. And the respect starts to fade. But when your kindness is rooted in strength, when it comes with boundaries, clarity, and unwavering self-respect, then it becomes undeniable. Then people don't just like you, they respect you. And when people respect you, they treat you differently. They think twice before crossing a line. They show up with more care, more attention, more integrity, because they know you value yourself. And people can only meet you at the level you've met yourself. So don't stop being kind. Just stop letting your kindness come at the cost of your dignity. Let your kindness be a strength, not a signal that you'll tolerate anything. Let it be a standard, not a sacrifice. Let it be rooted, not reactive. You know, there's this common belief floating around that if you're just nice enough, if you go out of your way for people, show up for them, never say no, they'll value you more. That being endlessly agreeable will somehow earn you love, loyalty, and respect. But I've got to be real with you. It usually doesn't work that way. In fact, more often than not, it backfires because people pleasing, though it may wear the costume of kindness, isn't actually rooted in strength. It's rooted in fear, and fear never commands respect. Fear seeks permission. Fear performs. It adapts. It compromises core needs in exchange for temporary approval. And over time, people start to sense that. You see, when you're constantly trying to please everyone, you're actually sending a subtle but powerful message. My value is based on your reaction to me. My peace depends on whether or not you approve of me. My boundaries are flexible. If it means I get to avoid tension, that kind of energy doesn't inspire trust. It doesn't create healthy dynamics. What it does is make people feel like they can take from you without limit. It's not that people consciously want to disrespect you. It's just that when you constantly prioritize others at the expense of yourself, you're teaching them that your needs come last. And here's the psychological depth of it. Humans, by nature, are driven by consistency. We treat people based on how they treat themselves. So if you treat your own time, voice, or energy as disposable, guess what? So will everyone else. I'm not saying you shouldn't help people. I'm not saying you should become cold or rigid. What I'm saying is that there's a major difference between kindness and self-erasure. When every decision you make is filtered through the question, will they still like me if I do this? You're not being generous. You're being held hostage by your own need to be accepted. And that's where the disrespect begins. People start canceling plans on you last minute, and you act like it's no big deal. They speak to you in ways they wouldn't tolerate themselves, and you brush it off. You're always available, always giving, always the one adjusting. And they stop seeing your effort as a gift. It becomes the expectation, the baseline. And when that becomes the baseline, anything less than your full sacrifice feels like neglect to them. Now, here's the philosophical piece. The great thinkers, whether it's the Stoics or modern psychologists, they all touch on this same idea. You cannot find fulfillment in life if you're constantly living for other people's expectations. Living in fear of disappointing someone else is a quiet form of self-betrayal. It chips away at your identity, one yes at a time. You start to lose your own voice in the noise of pleasing others. You say yes when your soul is screaming no. You show up for everyone but start resenting it because deep down, you know you're never doing it from fullness. You're doing it from fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of being seen as difficult. And that's the trap, because the more you do it, the more invisible you become. People respect those who are clear, not cruel, not controlling, clear. People who know what they're about. People who can say, I care about you, but this doesn't work for me, and not flinch. That level of self-possession, that calm inner boundary, it's magnetic. It's not loud. It's not defensive. It just is. And people instinctively lean in to respect it, even if they don't always like it. But when you're constantly contorting yourself to be palatable, you're erasing your own edge. You become smooth, unthreatening, agreeable, and unfortunately forgettable. Because the truth is, people remember strength, not dominance. Authentic strength, the kind that says, I'm willing to be misunderstood rather than misrepresent myself. Let's break this down with a real-world example. Think of a friend who's always there for everyone, always dropping what they're doing to help, but they never speak up when someone crosses the line. They never push back when they're disrespected. Over time, what happens? People start assuming they'll always be there, and the friend who's constantly giving starts feeling invisible, drained, resentful. Not because people are inherently cruel, but because there were no boundaries to guide the relationship. And without boundaries, kindness becomes currency. People feel entitled to. Now imagine that same friend starts shifting, still kind, still generous, but now they pause before saying yes. Now they voice when something doesn't feel right. Now they stop over-explaining their decisions. At first there's pushback because people don't like losing easy access, but then something happens. The energy shifts. Respect enters the room. You can feel that shift in your own life too, but it starts with breaking the people-pleasing habit. And that's not easy because people-pleasing often begins in childhood. It's a survival mechanism. You learn that love is conditional, that approval is earned through performance, that keeping others happy is the path to feeling safe. But what kept you safe then is now keeping you small. You've got to unlearn it. You've got to stop equating conflict with failure. You've got to stop apologizing for having needs. You've got to recognize that the people who truly matter, who are truly worth keeping, won't leave when you set boundaries. If they do, they were only connected to your compliance, not your character. The greatest act of self-respect is to show up as you are, not as who you think people want you to be. Because here's the bottom line. Respect and approval don't always live in the same house. If your goal is to be respected, sometimes people won't approve of you. They might be disappointed. They might disagree, but they'll know where you stand. They'll know who they're dealing with. And over time, that clarity earns more loyalty than any amount of people-pleasing ever could. So if you've been bending, performing, shrinking just to stay in someone's good graces, maybe it's time to ask at what cost. Because the moment you stop pleasing people and start honoring yourself, the disrespect stops too. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because you do. And once you show people you're no longer afraid to lose their approval, you gain something far greater, their respect. Let's talk about consistency, because it's one of the most overlooked ingredients in earning genuine respect. We live in a culture that often equates kindness with being liked. But here's the problem. Being liked is not the same as being respected. In fact, many of the most liked people, the ones who bend over backwards to keep everyone happy, are often the ones who get taken for granted the most. Why? Because they're kind without consistency. And without consistency, people don't know where your lines are or if they even exist. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second, because the truth is, people don't respect what's soft and shifting. They respect what's steady, what's reliable, what doesn't change based on mood pressure or who's watching. That's what consistency is about. And when your kindness is consistent with your values, your standards, and your self-respect, that's when it becomes powerful. Let me be clear. I'm not saying stop being kind. I'm saying start being congruent. Be the kind of person whose actions match their principles. Because if you're kind on Monday, bitter on Tuesday, people-pleasing on Wednesday, and burned out by Friday, no one knows which version of you they're dealing with. That kind of inconsistency doesn't create safety. It creates confusion, and confused people don't trust easily. The core of this issue lies in identity. A lot of us don't really know where we stand because we've spent so long trying to adapt, trying to avoid discomfort, trying to keep everyone calm. And in doing so, we've lost our anchor. So our kindness becomes reactive instead of intentional. We give when we're afraid to say no. We serve when we're terrified of rejection. We smile when we feel used. That's not kindness. That's self-betrayal in disguise. True consistency starts with clarity. You need to know what you stand for before anyone else can respect you. You need to define your non-negotiable. What you will accept, what you won't, not as a way to control others, but as a way to protect your peace. When your kindness is filtered through that clarity, it no longer feels like a performance. It feels like presence, like integrity. And here's the fascinating part. Psychologically speaking, people crave consistency in others. It's a shortcut the brain uses to decide whether someone is safe, reliable, or worth listening to. When you are consistent in your energy, in your values, in your boundaries, people relax around you. They may not always agree with you, but they trust that you're not going to flip or fold the moment things get uncomfortable. That kind of presence commands respect, not because you demand it, but because you earn it. Now contrast that with someone who's only kind when it's easy, only agreeable when they're in a good mood, only generous when there's applause on the other side of it. That's not strength. It's strategy. And people can feel that. They may not call it out, but they sense the lack of integrity. And that lack of integrity, arides, respect, one moment at a time. This is especially important when you're dealing with people who are used to manipulating or pushing boundaries. If your kindness isn't backed by consistency, they'll test you. They'll push. And if they see you waver, say one thing, but do another, they'll know they can keep doing it. But when your yes means yes, and your no means no, when you show up with the same energy, whether you're praised or criticized, those people start to back off, not because they suddenly became better, but because you stopped being easy to manipulate. Let's take it a layer deeper. Philosophers like Immanuel Kant talked about acting from a place of duty, not for reward, not for approval, but because it aligns with your principles. That's what consistency really is. It's not about being rigid. It's about knowing that your internal compass doesn't shift just because the external environment gets loud. It's about doing what's right, even if no one claps for you. And that's what separates performative kindness from principled kindness. So let me ask you, are you kind because it's who you are, or are you kind because it keeps the peace? If it's the second, you're setting yourself up to be overlooked, misunderstood, or even mistreated. Because the moment your kindness is tied to conditions, to outcomes, to approval, you become inconsistent. And inconsistency is the beginning of distrust. Think about leadership for a second. The best leaders in any space, whether it's parenting, politics, business, or relationships, they don't earn respect because they're the nicest. They earn it because people know what to expect from them. Their tone, their feedback, their decisions, these things don't fluctuate with every emotion or external shift. There's a groundedness to them, a steadiness, and it's that steadiness that people lean into. You can be kind and firm, compassionate and clear. It's not a contradiction. It's the balance. And here's the beautiful part. When you build that kind of internal consistency, your kindness becomes more impactful, not less. People begin to trust it. They begin to feel safe around it. They know that when you show up, it's real. It's not performative. It's not transactional. It's rooted. And rooted things don't get uprooted easily. You stop over-explaining. You stop over-jiving. You stop apologizing for having standards. You begin to walk differently, not louder, not harsher, just firmer. And when that shift happens, people notice, not because you became someone else, but because you finally stopped abandoning yourself to be liked. So, if you're wondering why your kindness hasn't earned you the respect you deserve, don't look at the kindness itself. Look at how consistent you've been in expressing it through your values. Look at whether people know where your lines are. Look at whether your kindness is coming from fear or from strength. Because ultimately, consistency is the language of integrity. And integrity is the foundation of real respect. Kindness may open the door, but consistency is what keeps people from slamming it shut. And when you combine both, kindness with conviction, generosity with groundedness, you stop being someone people can walk over. You become someone they listen to, someone they trust, someone they respect. Here's a truth most people don't want to face. You teach people how to treat you, not with your words, not with your intentions, but with your patterns, with what you allow, with what you reinforce, and especially with what you let slide under the disguise of kindness. Every single interaction you have is a silent lesson. It's either teaching others that you have self-respect or that you'll trade your self-worth for peace, for validation, or for proximity. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also one of the most empowering realizations you can come to because it means you have the power to change. Let's dig into this. We all know people who seem to attract disrespect, who constantly feel overlooked, used, or dismissed. And it's easy to blame others. They're toxic. They're selfish. They don't care. And sometimes that's true. But often, it's not just about them. It's about what we've communicated through our behavior. See, when someone disrespects you once and you don't address it, you're not just letting it go. You're signaling that there's no consequence for it. And the brain, both yours and theirs, is always taking notes. Oh, I can talk to them this way. I can cancel on them last minute. I can cross this boundary and nothing happens. Noted. And this isn't about being petty or reactive. It's about understanding that silence is not neutral. It's interpreted, and it's usually interpreted as permission. Think about the psychological mechanisms behind this. Humans are observational learners. We watch, we assess, we adjust. If you continually sacrifice your time for someone who never reciprocates, they learn that your time isn't valuable. If you constantly forgive without even a conversation, they learn that consequences don't exist in your world. If you smile through discomfort just to avoid conflict, they learn that you'll put their feelings above your own pain. That's the message. That's the lesson. And eventually they behave accordingly. Now you may be thinking, but I was just trying to be kind. I didn't want to make it a big deal. And I get that. I really do. But there's a difference between grace and passivity, between understanding and enabling. And when your kindness repeatedly excuses disrespect, it's no longer kindness, it's complicity. You've got to start taking responsibility for the standards you're reinforcing in your relationships. That might mean friends, family, coworkers, even romantic partners. If someone is consistently falling short in how they treat you and nothing ever changes, the common denominator isn't just them. It's the lack of clear correction on your end. Now, I'm not saying you need to blow up, cut people off, or become hyper-confrontational. This isn't about drama. It's about direction. You show people how to engage with you by what you allow. And the most powerful correction isn't loud. It's firm. It's a quiet shift in how you respond. It's a boundary stated, a pattern broken, a standard raised. You might be surprised how quickly people adjust when they realize they no longer have access to the old version of you. The version that absorbed the disrespect, stayed silent to keep the peace, or kept showing up without being appreciated. When that version disappears, they have a choice: rise to meet the new you or fall away. And either outcome is a win. Let's take this even deeper. Philosophically speaking, this is about agency. The Stoics spoke often about focusing only on what is within your control. You can't control how others behave, but you can absolutely control what you accept. That's the core of self-respect. It's not about forcing others to behave. It's about removing yourself from environments where your value isn't recognized. When you embrace that kind of internal power, everything changes. You stop seeking validation from others because you've already validated yourself. You stop tolerating disrespect because you've built a life where your peace is non-negotiable. You stop explaining your standards because you understand they're not up for debate. But here's the thing. It takes work. This isn't about flipping a switch. It's about unlearning years of conditioning, because many of us were raised to be agreeable, to be liked, to avoid conflict. We were taught that saying no is rude, that speaking up is confrontational, that prioritizing ourselves is selfish. None of that is true. In fact, one of the kindest things you can do for yourself and for others is to be honest, to let people know where the line is, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Because when people understand your boundaries, they get a chance to meet you with intention. And if they don't want to, if they choose to keep crossing lines, they're showing you who they really are. And that too is a lesson. You see, teaching people how to treat you isn't just about defending your space. It's about defining your identity. It's about saying, this is who I am. This is how I show up. This is what I expect in return. Not with arrogance, not with ego, but with unwavering self-awareness. And when you move through life like that, you stop attracting chaos. You stop inviting disrespect. You stop explaining your worth because your presence does that for you. People sense the shift. They sense when you're no longer performing for acceptance. They feel when your kindness is a choice, not a plea, and they adjust or they exit. Either way, you win. So I'll say it again. You teach people how to treat you. Every conversation is a classroom. Every reaction is a curriculum.